Reacher, Hot Lap League, and Free Radicals. This is Staying In.
The other day at work, we all got together after the bank holiday, and we were like, what did you do for your bank holiday? And I think like the three probably the most typical things that Brits probably do on a bank holiday is visit family, do a bit of DIY, and do a bit of gardening if the weather's nice. And so we were all chatting about our little bank holidays, and our boss he'd gone to visit his family, and another colleague at work he'd done a bit of DIY, and someone else she'd been in the garden. Then it turned to me. I said, "Oh, Sam, what have you been doing?" I was like, "Oh, well, this weekend I was helping my father-in-law dig the foundations for his hot tub."
Oh my word.
And they all pretty much said, "Well, that sounds like the ultimate bank holiday." And I was like, in the garden, DIY with the father-in-law.
I've got a lot of questions.
I also haven't felt more white and middle class.
I would feel uncomfortable as well, because the hot tub, let's not muck about here. The hot tub is a space to unwind, relax, and to make ill-advised copies of that scene from Showgirls.
I've not even seen Showgirls.
Have you not seen Showgirls?
Some people say the Criterion collection is the most fascinating. I think the Willington collection of films is the most interesting curated list.
That scene from Showgirls.
How do you feel about building something in which, you're going to end up with a lot of nad soup or a lot of...
nad soup? That's the description you're going with.
Yeah, that is what you end up with in a hot tub. You just end up with soup.
Do you?
I remember there being a hot tub on Sam's stag, and we got in the hot tub, at which point we realised it was far too small for the amount of grown men that were sitting in it. We were like, this is a little uncomfortable.
Dan, water came over the top of it when we all got in.
Yeah.
We were like, we're sitting a little too close here. This is uncomfortable.
I ate a slice of pizza while I was in it, and then when I woke up the next day, I was covered in a weird layer of salt. I was just like, oh, no.
What, brine?
I think it was brine, I'll be honest.
Oh, my word.
Like, when you drain a tin of tuna.
Yeah. Just Peter basted himself. Oh. That's funny. Well, Pete, but I don't know if you saw the big thing on Twitter. Do you see the big thing on Twitter?
There seems like so many big things on Twitter at the moment. I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
News just in, a massive thing has just happened on Twitter that I don't feel like we have the brains or indeed insight to go into in any meaningful way. But it was the big board gaming thing on Twitter. The big board gaming thing. Did you see it? What does the name Mandy Patinkin mean to you?
Mandy Patinkin?
Just think about that.
Mandy
what does that name mean to Peter Willington?
Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah. You can keep saying it.
You can keep saying it whilst you quickly Google it. I mean, we know what you're doing.
It sounds like a kind of, I don't know. It sounds like a sort of slightly delightful fairy tale person, maybe they're like as they say their surname, like there's like the chime of bells.
Well, they are a delightful person. That is true, and actually a good
there are
worthwhile
connections
follow.
To an almost fairy tale type.
Yes. Have you never watched The Princess Bride?
I have.
Was it double bill with Showgirls? So this is like a big thing in board gaming Twitter. You must have seen it, Pete. It was a video of Mandy Patinkin with his family trying to get their head around the rules of Wingspan.
Oh, is that the one who was going on about the rules? Yeah, the rules were like really intense, really over the top, and they just didn't understand it.
Yeah, and then all of board game Twitter came in through the door going, well,
you know, Wingspan's actually really easy if...
I've got... Right, okay, yeah. So I'm going to get on my high horse for a second here.
Okay,
here we go.
fair enough.
Let me take a run up at this one. Hold on. Take a run up at this one. There's a reason that board games as an industry is a fraction of wider entertainment industries, and a huge amount of it, like a huge amount of it, is this idea that, how can we get people into board games? But also, here's my 4-hour-long Euro game about how the German political system works. And like, here's the 45 minutes of setup and 30 minutes of rules intro that I need to give you. It gets good after 6 games. Like, I find it so infuriating. And like seeing that happen on Twitter, where it was like these people were like, am I an idiot? Am I an idiot for not understanding what is being said on this in this rule book? And I was like, no, you're not.
But yeah, after we shared that video with us, and then we kind of got chatting as well about, like, a lot of people in the comments are just like, you know, Wingspan's such a gateway game, like, you know, all this kind of stuff. And like, it struck me then when we were chatting about it, and I watched this video, like, isn't it weird how, like, what is quote unquote considered the gateway games of board games just haven't changed for years and years and years and years. There's still, like, Carcassonne, Catan, Pandemic, especially those 3 just haven't really, like, I can't think of many that have really come
even
for
those aren't, like, really accessible. There's still a good, like, you have to learn an understanding of conventions of board, like Settlers Catan. If all you've ever played is Monopoly or the Game of Life, and you sit down with Settlers Catan, there's a lot of stuff that you've got to learn about resource management and stuff. There's, like, that's just completely alien to someone who doesn't play board games.
A true gateway game, genuinely, for me, a true gateway game is a game that the entire group could be brand new to board games. Not one of them have played what you would call a hobby board game, like, so outside of, like, the Hasbro lot and all that sort of, you know, Monopoly and Guess Who and all that sort of stuff. But they could all sit down fresh with that board game and understand what was being said and have a good time. Like, if I handed Catan to somebody and said, hey, you 4, you've never played these kinds of board games before, crack on, they would see the hexes immediately and be like, oh, I don't really understand what I'm meant to be doing here. And you still need somebody to kind of pull you along with it.
Or dress the game up and apply a theme, you know, to it, and, like, really bring the board game to life.
Role play it.
Yeah, right. Basically role play through it. And, like, because I think I may have stumbled across not stumbled, I think it probably is now considered one of like the gateway games. Like, I played Photosynthesis for the first time the other day, and this is the game that's been bobbing around for 5 years. 2017, I want to say. Photosynthesis came out, and this, I feel like, has got the two of the things, I think, which really help in terms of, like, making that gateway game, like bridging that gap. Like, I think one of the reasons why Pandemic, unfortunately, now it's seems a little bit off color, and Carcassonne always considered good gateway games, is that their theme is really strong. Like, in Pandemic, it's very clear what is happening on the board and what you have got to do as players, and it's very easy for you to inhabit that kind of thing. Like, here is a bad thing represented by these cubes. The less cubes you have, the better we are doing. And then same in Carcassonne, it's kind of like the longer that road is, the more points that road is worth. The bigger this city is, that's going to get me more points. Like, that's very easy sort of iconography for people to understand, which means that there's more room left over in terms of, like, energy and mental capacity to, like, understand some of the nuances of why those games are so great. So in Photosynthesis, you have this magical theme where all it is, you're basically just growing trees, and it comes in this box which is just jam filled with punch out board, so I was having a whale of a time. And you spend the first sort of half an hour just building all these trees in 4 different colours. You've got small trees and medium trees and these big massive sort of oaks and pines and firs, and it's a really wonderful game. But it just makes it, when you get it to the table and bring it out in front of people, it makes it a real event. Like when you're giving someone their playing pieces to play with, you're giving them a forest. You're giving them this whole like bunch of trees that they can like play with and move and explore, and they've got little animals on their trunks, and like it is quite a magical game to experience. Like the art by Sabrina Miramon is really special, and the concept of the game is that you have this like crescent shape around the side of the board, which represents the sun. And depending on where the sun is, it shines light on the trees. And depending on the size of trees that you have grown in the forest, you'll get points. So say you've planted the tree and it's grown up to be a big, tall, strong boy, that's like 3 points, but only if the sun is able to shine on it. Same with the small little dinky trees. If the sun shines on that tree, you'll get 1 point. However, as we all know and can kind of understand, when the sun hits a tree, that tree will cast a shadow. So these big hefty boys there will cast a shadow like 3 lengths long across the board, which means any trees that are in the shade of that big tree don't get the sun on them, so you don't score points if those are one of your trees. And then at some point, a little bit sadly, you can choose to chop the trees down, and then you get points for having chopped down those trees. But before you chop down those trees, you might have decided to plant a seed, and those seeds drop from the trees in the same way that the sun and the shade work. So a big tree will drop a seed really far away because it's taller and it can spread out a lot further. However, a small tree will only drop a seed like next to it, just bobble away, pop onto the next space. And it just strikes me as a game that's not overly complicated, but because it's so tied up to its theme, and each of the mechanics is explainable by real world interactions and real things that we can see and that we understand, it made it so much easier to teach and introduce to a group of gamers and people who had not necessarily interacted with games as much as, say, myself and Kris and my wife have. And suddenly you have a table that are starting to, understand the concept of like, bigger is better, and casting shadows doesn't get you points. So that means I need to make sure that I'm planting trees far away from each other, so I'm getting a good spread of points. And then because the sun moves after every round, you get players that are starting to strategize and go, right, the sun's going to be here, so I need to make sure that I'm growing this tree and this tree, so I'm blocking out the light from that player, and I'm making the most of this situation. And because the points you earn are then recycled into trees that you can buy and seeds that you can plant and different actions that you can essentially do on your turn, there's a wonderful ramping up of complexity and understanding that blends with the game, that really I genuinely think it's like one of the modern gateway games. Like it's a really clever piece of work.
It's interesting because I think we sometimes, when I say we, I mean like the board gaming community, use the term gateway very broadly because there are different types of gateway I find. Like I'm noticing at the moment, like my partner's not a gamer, but I've been interested. They really like co-op games. So what I found is like, it's been really interesting. It's almost like my job where I'm putting together like a lesson plan, like a curriculum, and like starting off with like kind of smaller like co-op games, like for example Forbidden Desert, then moving on to things like Burgle Brothers, and then we did Pandemic the other day, and that's a gateway to a particular genre of gaming. Yeah. For others, there are those who just need to introduce them to kind of what Dan was alluding to. Board games aren't just roll and move, and there's nothing obviously wrong with roll and move, but that's actually something, a very common thing we're brought up on. But also you get those almost Trojan horse games which look like there should be a gateway game because the theme is perhaps gateway. Oh, I recognise that. I know trees. Or Wingspan. I know birds. Whoa, hang on. Yeah, and I love Wingspan to pieces because I love the theme. But if you took those mechanics and applied that to a different theme, I would really struggle with that game. Not that I wouldn't like it, it's just the case I wouldn't retain the mechanics as well, because I just wouldn't be able to marry it. And the theme for me is what draws me into that game. But I do think sometimes people look at it and think, well, it's not mechs, it's not rulers. It looks fairly indie. It's sold in, I don't know, it's sold in a bookshop. That's ipso facto, that must be a gateway game. And it's really interesting that you also get the reverse. The games that look really impenetrable, and the games I've not deliberately looked at or picked up because I think, okay, there's no way I can get into that. They've been surprisingly accessible. So it does. I think what's been very, very useful about this kind of Twitter feed, apart from filtering through all the bile that's on there, is it actually raises really pertinent questions regarding, well, actually, when we say gateway, to what exactly?
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing that, when I think about games that I introduce to people for the first time, I don't think about gateway games. I just think about things like The Mind and Illusion, and I played Medium with a family the other weekend, and they absolutely loved it.
I think Sushi Go is a really good one to introduce to people.
Sushi Go is
a really good one, just to introduce the idea of cards that aren't just your typical kind of spades, clubs, hearts, diamonds kind of thing.
Absolutely. But I think there's something slightly different about a gateway game where it's kind of like, this is your first start on the hobby. It's not like, oh, remember that game that Dan brought around? That was really fun. Yeah, maybe we should play that game. Or, Sam brings around some interesting games now and again. Oh, like that's great. But a gateway game is like, right, you play Pandemic, now you're going to play this, and like, oh yeah, you've played this and now you're going to play that. And I think do you think maybe there is a bit of like why it feels like such a protected resource is kind of like that first experience of what's actually going to get you into the hobby is such a valuable one that it does almost feel like, well, it's got to be, the perfect start.
I think it is, because the idea of the gateway game implies a journey beyond that one game. Like, as I say, like something like Sushi Go, you can play it in a group, and like kids, like I've got like young nephews, like 7 or 8, who will play it and absolutely love it, and they'll play it, and then it goes away and it's fine. You just played a game, that's fine. There's no requirement to go any further than that. Whereas the concept of the gateway game is, okay, we're starting on a journey where you're going to build a game collection and you're going to really get into this, and this is going to be a big part of your life. And so that's quite daunting. Yeah. And so to have more than one of those, they kind of needs to be really a concise group. That's why we talk about just a couple of them. I mean, you've got like really popular, slightly more not your Monopoly stuff like code names and stuff is a great entry point, but it doesn't really feed into that journey because it is more of a party game. So the party games don't really fall under that bracket. Whereas like your likes of your code names, or like stuff like maybe in the past something like Cards Against Humanity, stuff that just introduces other types of gaming experiences. Like you can have a drink with them, you can do them anywhere. Like Settlers Catan, like you kind of it's if it's the first time you're playing it, you're not going to have a drink with it. You need to sit down and concentrate, and it becomes something more serious than just I'm going to play a game now. Because kind of if you're not in the hobby, playing a board game is just fun. You play it once and you've had a nice time and you move on and that's it. As opposed to it becoming a part of kind of, it sounds quite grandiose and quite serious, but becoming part of your life going forward type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really interesting because I think there are also gateway games actually are there to get people into the act of a game full stop, whatever it is, like play. Like I think we sometimes take for granted that play comes naturally to us. It doesn't for a lot of people. It's really interesting. Like the idea of as an adult engaging in things that for some can seem quite frivolous is quite an abstract concept. Like, and I remember with my family, I bought them The Resistance. No, I bought them Werewolf. A few years ago, I bought them Werewolf, and I wasn't there to teach it to them. I sent it to them, and they just opened it out, and they're like, "What's this? How do we do this?" And my parents are quite seasoned board gamers and things, but the idea of a social deduction game they've really struggled with. I mean, we do love it at times, but I know some people in our group struggle with the whole idea of having to lie, to bluff. That's not their forte whatsoever. And it suddenly, it almost doesn't matter how long you've been in gaming for. It's actually sometimes about what the level of interaction is being asked of you around the table, really.
I've played Resistance in the past where people have got upset, genuinely upset, because they can't grasp the concept of what's happening. And like, to people kind of used to games and used to just thinking in a certain way, because you trained yourself, it's not something that you've just naturally have. You've trained yourself to think a certain way. It comes naturally to you. Like the fact you could say, "Oh, you just do this," is really easy. But if you don't have that kind of bed in, like people, I've seen people like in tears because they can't understand, and yet everyone else seems to, and that's a really difficult thing to kind of handle, because if everyone's doing it, you then criticize yourself. You feel like I'm stupid and stuff like that, and it's not. It's just people understand things in different ways, and people, in the same way that some people are more visual or kind of read kind of in order to gain information, people learn things in different ways, and these games kind of do that same thing. Something like Resistance is great for a lot of people, but for some people it's a really struggle. Like as you were saying, that the concept of a social deduction against people and lying being part of it. If you've been brought up on, as I say, the game of life, you've been brought up on Monopoly, maybe Cluedo and stuff like that, like these are kind of the concepts of those games are kind of quite simple. As you say, you roll the dice, you move, something happens. Next person, you roll the dice, you move, something's kind of a defined group of actions can possibly happen. There's not really a lot of thinking to do. For, say, with Monopoly, I land on Pall Mall. Do I want to buy it? No. Okay, next turn. It's very, very simple. But to move beyond that, for some people, completely understandably, can be quite difficult because they don't have that kind of in-bed desire naturally to understand it.
I went and had a nice little sauna last week. Or
Sauna.
Sauna. That's what they call it there. Yeah.
There.
I went to Sweden.
Oh my word.
And
Mamma mia.
and because saunas are like a really important part of Swedish culture.
Yeah, all the
They're
Nordics.
like ubiquitous.
Yeah.
So the hotel was like, yeah, you can use our sauna for free. Just book an hour slot. You get it to yourself. So great, brilliant. It was really nice. It was the longest I'd ever spent in a sauna.
How long did you spend in there?
About nearly an hour. I know, Pete, you can go longer than that.
I can go a lot longer in the sauna.
I picture you, Pete, you're like one of those desert beetles that in the morning you crawl to the top of the dune and you do like some elaborate handstands so the water condensation trickles down into your mouth.
I nearly, and this is not a good thing, I nearly fell asleep in a sauna once.
Oh my
and that
word.
that was not good. That was the point where I was like, I've been too long in here.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they would have to take you out with a dustpan and brush.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Oh, I love saunas.
Yeah,
Oh,
see,
my God.
saunas, I'm not a huge, I can't stay in a sauna for too long. I can stay longer in a steam room.
I was going to say, you can do a steam room, right?
Steam room I find more pleasant than a sauna. It's a bit too dry in a sauna.
Yeah.
No, but this was quite nice because like the idiot people hadn't like piled on loads of like water onto it, so it was a really nice temperature in there. So you could sufficiently kind of you know when you're in a steam room so a sauna for too long where you actually burn your nose as you're breathing in.
Yeah.
I've had that situation.
Love that
It
bit.
wasn't like that bad. No.
Pete, you sound disappointed. It's like, oh, that's the best bit. That is.
Yeah, it's the best bit. This starts to really like clear your
when you
pores
start
out.
to like burn the insides as well as the out. Yeah, that's the good stuff.
What was the sauna etiquette like? Did you have to like provide your own towels?
No, they provided towels.
Did you have to use a towel?
Well, we had it to ourselves, so
So you thought,
I did Google it. I must admit beforehand, Peter said, "What is sauna etiquette in Sweden?" Because I don't want to be offensive. And generally, the kind of the rule is if like you're in like a swimming baths or something like that, you go nude with like a towel wrapped around you. If it's in like a hotel or something, because you get a lot of international guests who aren't overly comfortable with that. They'll say on signs what the request is really, whether it's like swimming gear or whatever, full wetsuit. I don't know, but like I'm not as. I mean, less layers is best, really. Let's be honest.
I mean, I think we all know that Pete would just strip down to his bare bones, regardless of the instructions.
I think he'd add more layers, Dan. To be honest.
So here's an interesting thing. So hopefully, because we're putting we are able somehow to be purchasing a house at the moment, and it's moving along still. It's taking far too long, but at the bottom of the garden is a sauna.
Amongst the birds and the bees?
Amongst the birds and the bees. There is a sauna. And I thought to myself, how am I, like, my first sort of reaction to it was like, am I going to be able to get from the house to the sauna without having to take, like, a bathrobe with me?
Yes,
could I just
yes, you have to take a bathrobe.
I think that's a question that's best directed at your new neighbours.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Like, are they able to see into my garden? And if no, then, well, let it all hang out. But if they can, then how would I handle the rest of that? Would I get myself like a sauna bathrobe, or would I get like some Speedos?
I mean, a robe is all you need, and you can just take it off at the sauna and put it back on at the sauna. So
you've got that magpie tea towel, I got you.
Exactly.
That could be for the sauna.
Oh.
You've got the apron of all of our faces.
Yeah, but that doesn't cover the back.
So what he's saying is we need to buy you a second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you picturing your new neighbours, just being stood at their windowsill with like a set of opera glasses each?
Yeah. I'm sort of picturing them with like a pince nez on and it popping out whenever they see me walk down the thing. So we could actually at some point this year, if it all goes through, and my wordly word, touch wood, I hope it all does. At some point later this year,
we're all going to be naked in a sauna together.
We could all be naked in a sauna together.
I mean, like,
couldn't we?
Even in the event of kind of like there being a sauna, I'm not sure how comfortable I'd be going there, knowing the fact that you are regularly in there, naked, sweaty. I'm not sure how I'd feel about. You know what? I'm good inside. I'm good. You go out, have a nice time in the steam. Are you
honestly saying all the lads are over? We're all over at my house.
You're going to sit there on your own.
Who fancies getting all their clothes off and going and sitting in my weird sauna? And you would say to yourself, no, thank you. No, that is not a story I would like to tell a future podcast listener. Like, that is not something I would like to do.
Because that's the basis of the conversation. Like, this will be discussed on a podcast. This isn't something that's going to happen in private.
Record it in the sauna. It'd be
I remember being in Iceland about over 20 years ago and using the outdoor Blue Lagoon. And because they don't have chlorine in the water because it's all natural, they're very strict on hygiene. So they had this woman who would just stand there and watch us shower to make sure that we were properly showering in the right areas. I remember that. There was like a diagram of the human body with the red zones that we had to focus on more, which is essentially the armpits.
Were you like
and the stuff below the equator?
Is anyone thinking perhaps this woman didn't work there and Kris just he's just
yes, I work here.
This is like Kris, this was a problem. This wasn't legal.
So tell us more about your trip away, Kris.
Right, okay, I learned a wonderful Swedish word, which is more of a philosophy as well as a word. And apologies for any Swedish listeners who I'm butchering this. Fika, F-I-K-E, or Fika, okay. Fika. And it's a bit like the Danish hygge, this notion. And Fika is basically, it encapsulates drinking coffee, eating sweet things, and chatting with mates. And it's like a prerequisite for all people in Swedish need to have that right to Fika. So like to have that time should be made in your working day to get together with mates, drink coffee and have something sweet and chat together. That was quite nice. There's a lot of like, yeah, exactly. A lot of cafes, a lot of cafe culture and stuff there. I went to this great museum called the Vasa Museum, which is a museum about a massive ship from the 1600s, which got 1,500 meters into harbour and then just sank. Because basically the king at that time wanted to show off, king or queen, whoever's in power at that time, wanted to show off how much wealth they had. So they basically pimped out this ship. Everything above the water was massive and gold and ornate. And they just didn't weigh it down enough at the bottom. They just basically put a single layer of stones. It looked like a garden rockery. And it just went out and just sank.
Oh my God.
You look at it, but what they did was in the 60s, they pulled the whole thing up piece by piece and reassembled it. So 98% of it is now intact. So you walk in and you've got this whole ship. It was like the end of Uncharted, Sam. You see the
my
whole
God.
ship there.
Wow.
You're walking beneath it, by the side of it. You're going above. You're learning about, the history of how the ship was made, why it sank, OVS, because you literally were stood at one level and it says, this was the waterline, and you're looking up and you feel a bit like, that handyman in The Simpsons who just goes, yep, there's your problem. It felt a bit like that. You look and thinking, of course it sank. How could it not sink? And they've essentially, they spent like about 6 years in the early 2000s replacing all of the 4,000, I think, or 40,000 iron bolts with stainless steel ones. And they've basically sprayed it with this material. It's the same ingredient you get in like moisturizer and lipstick just to preserve it. It's absolutely extraordinary. You walk in and there's this whole galleon in front of you. It's incredible. And yeah, that was brilliant. I saw a really cool Andy Warhol exhibition. We did a lot of walking. Ate some Swedish meatballs in an old monastery that was then a prison under the streets. That was quite cool. And tried to take on as much of that kind of Swedish kind of culture as possible, really. And it was really, really good. The air was so fresh. And the metro system's amazing because it's like a gigantic art gallery. And we went to this open air zoo. I saw bears, bison, a wolverine, which had a ladder in its pen, which somebody had left, which isn't a pretty good idea. Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Loved it to pieces. Can highly recommend Stockholm. And I think if I went back, I'd probably go somewhere a little bit more rural to explore rural Sweden because it's just such a massive country.
I also have been on holiday, but I think my holiday was the antithesis of Kris's holiday because it was primarily just based around kind of kids in swimming pools and like just going for a drink and like not doing any kind of like museums or anything like that. I went to with family. We had a family holiday to Canary Islands in Lanzarote, and like we had like an all-inclusive hotel, so you have food and drink all provided for you, and you can walk around the town, and like the kids go in the swimming pool and all that stuff. But like the complete opposite of like a cultural kind of city break style holiday where you're looking at kind of museums and art galleries and all that stuff. Like it was a fascinating place. Like I didn't realize because Lanzarote was the island I went to. Like I didn't realize how Lanzarote was kind of created through kind of volcanic rock and stuff. I just had no idea. So when I got there, it feels quite barren until you realize there's no earth here. It's just all rock. And like there's no greenery other than like cactuses, and like you see like people growing kind of, I think like grapes, like a vineyard or something like that, but like they're all buried, they're all kind of planted in like gravel, like there's a playground and there's gravel on the ground because that's all they have, and everything is it's so bizarre and kind of beautiful when you understand what it is. Actually, this is all kind of lava from hundreds of years, kind of thing like that. Suddenly it becomes very different, and like you realize that everywhere you look, it's just rock. And so when I came back home, it was kind of like, oh, grass, greenery. This is like, whoa, this is all new. So I had a lovely holiday, an exhausting holiday. Like even though because we're in a hotel room, I had to go to bed at 8:30, kind of every night, which for the first like 2 nights was a bit annoying. And then I was like, this is quite nice, actually. I get a nice long sleep. Because the kids had to go to bed there. And I couldn't leave the kids and go off by myself. So I was kind of like, okay, well, we'll just go to bed then. And I was like, ooh, I'm getting quite a nice sleep here. 8:30, 9 o'clock. I usually go to bed around 11:30, midnight. So this was very new for me. I mean, I've gone back to it now. I've not stuck around with my 8:30. As you can tell, 'cause it's 8:30 now. And I'm not asleep. But yeah, so it was a lovely holiday. It was very, very different to a nice kind of romantic break to Stockholm.
Hey, listen.
Hey, listen.
Do you know?
Hey, listen.
Hey, listen.
Hey, listen.
Hey, listen.
Hey, listen.
A little while ago, I've been revisiting some of the games and the game ideas from that we talked about a few hundred episodes back, because we're now on 150. And I went back over the weekend and was playing Cells of Glory. I was playing a bit of that. Which we talked about on episode 60 something.
I'm sure
61, I think.
something like that. And I, have been revisiting. We've been playing Ticket to Ride recently, and there you go. There's a gateway game. That's a game that we've kind of talked about a lot in the past.
Pretty
and there's
decent.
a game I've been playing recently on my mobile telephone that reminds me of a game that we talked about very early on back in the day, and that is Hot Lap League.
So, but no, that's the game, not the game it reminds you of.
Correct. The game that it reminds me of is TrackMania,
which is one of Pete's favourite games of all time.
One of my favourite games of all time. Well, it actually reminds me of Nations Forever, but it's the one we talked about back in the day, TrackMania
Turbo.
What was
Turbo?
it? Turbo.
We've definitely talked about TrackMania Turbo in the past.
Episode 4 of the podcast. TrackMania
Really?
Turbo. Episode 4.
Jeez
Yeah.
Louise. Episode 4. I wonder if anybody's listening now and they've been here since episode 4. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Wondering when are we going to go back to talking about TrackMania?
Yeah, exactly.
That was what hooked them in, and they've been
That's what
waiting.
hung me on. I've been 146 episodes in and still
There you
haven't
go.
heard. Anyway,
Here's
well,
the payoff.
It was also mentioned in episode 100 as part of our top 10
There
things
you go.
worth staying in for.
There you go.
I don't know if
There
it
you go.
made
So
the top
Pete,
10.
Pete,
but
you mentioned, Pete, you're playing this on your mobile telephone.
my mobile telephone, I am playing Hot Lap League, and it is basically TrackMania Nations Forever.
It sounds like something written
my
on the sign for Chris's sauna. The Hot Lap League.
The Hot Lap League
Yeah.
meets here every Wednesday.
Yeah, in the red zone.
Yeah, towels are optional. So the Hot Lap League is it's a paid mobile game. So it's not got any of those skeezy ads or anything along those lines. It does have a currency in it, but it's a currency that meters out progression rather than something particularly like onerous, and it only does cosmetics. So I guess it's kind of like Rocket League before Rocket League went free to play. So you can buy cosmetics and stuff along those lines, but you really don't need them, and you get a bunch of currency for free anyway. So it really doesn't seem to be too much of an issue. But if you've not played TrackMania before, and I think we've all played TrackMania. Yeah, we've all played TrackMania.
Absolutely, yeah.
It is a really straightforward racing game in so much as, and this is going to sound really obvious, but it has accelerate, brake, left and right. Okay, and like
Does it have aftertouch?
so in this one it slightly does, yes. So it's an arcade racing experience. You don't have to worry about gears, you don't have to worry about any of that sort of stuff. And indeed, the tracks that you're on in Hot Lap League they're kind of like roller coasters essentially. They're suspended above the ground, and there's loopity loops, there's corkscrews, there's huge jumping gaps. There are like really fast chicanes, and then it also brings in this mechanic which I don't think TrackMania has, which is it brings in drifting. So in this one, it allows you to tap a button in the middle of the screen, and almost like the grippiness of the tires becomes a lot less for a fraction of a moment, and that allows you to Initial D style drift around stuff at a high speed. And I know it's sometimes a little bit gauche to refer to something constantly as it's like this other thing, but
Yeah.
but it is so like that other thing. I think that's what they were going for. Like I can't imagine a world in which the folks who made Hot Lap League, which I believe is a company called Ultimate, which someone told me they've got ties with like Supercell or something along those lines. I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly well made enough to think that somebody with a lot of money is backing it in some way. If they haven't seen TrackMania before, they are in for a shock, because they've basically made a very similar game, and that's no bad thing, because actually I think TrackMania works really well in more quick pick up and play, dip in and out kind of sessions, rather than get the disc out, chuck it into the system, then go through the load screen, then do all that sort of stuff. And I'm going to sit down now for 25 minutes and play TrackMania. Actually, it's pretty good when you're playing it portably. I actually really enjoyed TrackMania DS, for example. I thought that was a really good edition of TrackMania. because it was so fast, cartridge-based. It just loaded up real quick. And this is the same thing with Hot Lap League. But what it brings in that I think is that goes beyond stuff like TrackMania DS is and further into your TrackMania Turbos is it has daily challenges, for example. So every single day, the entire Hot Lap League racing community has the opportunity to play a daily challenge, and every single day, it only lasts that one 24-hour period, and you try and put in the fastest lap that you can possibly put in, and everybody goes up against one another, and it's brilliant because you're constantly trying to outdo everybody else. It has that one-upmanship of the best of those time trial related games, like TrackMania, like Mario Kart on the Wii, things like something like Mario Kart on the Wii, for example, where you're doing time trials and you're trying to cut fractions of seconds out of people's times, or Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, where you've got the speed wall and you're trying to really constantly trying to push those numbers. So it has this like online connection thing whereby you can play everybody around the world. Now, it's not quite there with some of its multiplayer stuff, whereby I think there is some stuff where it needs to. I think there are still some additions that, as a game, it could really improve upon. So, for example, right now there's no concept of friends in the game, and I think that somewhat damages it. I mean, like, Dan, you've been playing it as well, right?
Yeah, like I do have a bit of a soft spot for kind of arcade races. I don't tend to be particularly great at them, but I do have a soft spot for them. Like, the likes of your kind of Gran Turismo and stuff is like, that's beyond me. Like, I can't do those. But absolutely, give me a Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, give me Burnout Paradise. Absolutely, sign me up for those. But especially kind of games where I can go up against like a Ghost Lap and stuff like that. That is my absolute bread and butter. Like Mario Kart, obviously, I remember Mario Kart Wii, like me and you, Sam, on like Bowser's Castle 3, like literally me and you going against each other, Ghost Laps. Like we were down to a like fraction of a second between us, and it would be a case of if I touched the wall at any point, I restarted because there was no way I could get that back. And then like we did it on TrackMania Turbo. I remember we TrackMania Turbo like literally at probably about midnight, running around my living room because I just snatched the top spot from one of you guys, and like literally, I mean, I don't ever remember doing that with any other game. Jumping in the air, kind of obviously having to be very quiet, but kind of screaming silently into the air, and like absolutely having that. And this does have a similar thing. Like we did it relatively recently with kind of the remastered version of Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, and we kind of did some of that, especially with like some of those short races where like those it's a very quick refresh and kind of like, okay, restart. I've clipped something, I've gone slightly off the line, I know I can't get it back, restart, and it's brilliant for that. And that's what this game does as well. It gives you that element of, it says at the start, like if you want to restart, there's a button there, and it bang immediately puts you right back to the start and you can start again. I've not been playing it a lot yet, I just haven't had it very long, so I'm still kind of working my way through it. And one thing I do like about it is it has a really interesting, I've never really seen it before, because as kind of Pete mentioned, you've got like 3 controls. You've got left, you've got right, and you've got this drift button. But like if you go into kind of edit controls, you can choose where on the screen all of those buttons appear, and you can adjust. Okay, you can have the left and right all on the one side of the controller, or you can have them either side, you can have them small, you can have them big, and like you're literally kind of getting your fingers and stretching them and making them bigger and smaller. And I can put the drift button all the way along the bottom, or I could just have it in the middle. So, and I've never seen that before. It's a really interesting way of, like, especially at the start, you find yourself doing the races, working out, okay, well, where do my thumbs naturally go? Where is it best placed to put all these controls? And that's a really nice dynamic of kind of being able to really edit it to your own personal thing. Like, I've tried it in different ways. I'm like, actually, I'm not really getting that kind of drift button easily because I've not got the configuration quite right. I need to make the drift button slightly bigger just so my thumb can drop down to it more easily, or different things. So it's kind of really kind of clever in that sense. It's thinking about it. I absolutely agree. Like, it needs, like, if it had friends, if I could look at, Pete, your scores and I could go up against your Ghost Lap, like, my enjoyment of the game would increase kind of exponentially. It would like, yes, this is what I want from these games. I'm not someone who just wants to compete to be the best, because I'm never going to be the best. There's no interest in that for me, because I'm just not that good. But I can compete against friends who will probably be better than me, but I can it's kind of a point that I can get closer and closer and closer to, and then maybe overcome for, I don't know, a day, and then they take it further again. But it's that competition I can do, like friendly competition between us. Sign me up every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Yeah.
Competing against like random people who are far better than me, like I'm not interested. Like on Mario Kart, like I don't care that someone was able to do a course 30 seconds faster than me. That's not fun for me to try and work that out. I'm happy just going up against Sam, and like me and Sam like being neck and neck. That's what the fun is. And like jumping around my living room at midnight because I got a fraction of a second on one course because I took a boost ever so slightly better than someone else. It's just fantastic, and it does do that really, really well. It's just missing those couple of multiplayer elements which would really kind of push it a lot further.
Yeah, and the driving model just feels so snappy and like reliable. It sounds really odd, but like there are some of those arcade races where it feels like, oh, I didn't realize the car was going to react in that way. But no, like it's like Rocket League in that like that vehicle driving model is robust. You know exactly what you're doing, and every time it screws up, it's never a case of like, oh, I got screwed over there. It's like, yeah, that was me being bad. Like it's.
So a few weeks ago, Sam and I started watching Reacher. We watched episode 1 together. Reacher is not the actual theme tune.
How many rounds of it did you watch?
Well, there are 8 episodes in total.
So 8.
I've only watched 6. So Sam's completed it.
So you would say so you've watched 6 rounds of Reacher, and 8,
Indeed, yeah.
and Sam's watched 8 rounds of Reacher.
Yeah, go on.
Yep,
go on. We're all here for you, Pete. Go on. We all believe in you.
So what we're saying, what you're saying, Kris, is that Sam's had more Reacher rounds than you have.
He's watched more episodes of it, yeah. Well, he's watched the whole season 1.
He's not playing with you, Pete. He's not playing.
Now, I have realised, now you could all be in the same boat, there are certain IPs out there, intellectual properties, where I will go, okay, I don't want to watch it, I want to read it, because if it's based on a book, I just want to read the books. Thank you. Yeah. And there are others where actually I can't be bothered to read all of those. This series is quite good. I'm just going to watch the series. This is one of those, the latter part.
Welcome to Reacher. Yeah,
exactly. So this is from the Reacher, named after Jack Reacher, the character from Lee Child's books. And this first series is based on Lee Child's very first Jack Reacher book, Killing Floor, and from 1997. And this is an example of me going, oh, brilliant, because I've always been curious about the Reacher books, but I've just never ever got around to reading them. And the Tom Cruise film was all right. And I know it irked a lot of people, because when you look at, if you compare Alan Ritchson to Tom Cruise together, you realize, oh, okay, I can see why there was a massive outcry amongst Jack Reacher fans that Tom Cruise wasn't the Reacher they envisaged from the books.
Yeah. Considering that Alan is still shorter than what Jack Reacher is meant to be.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, it's extraordinary. He looks like, I mean, we'll talk about this in a little. I mean, he's extraordinary. Like, you just can't take your eyes off him. He's so magnetic.
Yes.
So this is on Amazon Prime, and it comes from Nick Santora, who worked on Sopranos and Prison Break back in the day. And it's essentially a monosyllabic and muscular Sherlock Holmes. Probably the best way of putting it.
Yeah, it's Sherlock Holmes did some bodybuilding and just got carried away. It's that was my big problem with the book, because I read The Killing Floor and didn't get all the way through, because Reacher is such a difficult character to sympathize with, empathize with, because he literally, there are moments in it where it's just like Reacher says nothing and he just says like one word, 2 words, and unlike Sherlock Holmes stories where you're seeing it through the lens of Watson. So you kind of, you're as aggrieved as Watson is when Sherlock's acting up or not giving much information. The Reacher books are all pretty much done from the third person. So you're just like discovering, the the world as Reacher sees it, and I found them very difficult to get along with in that respect, because I just couldn't sympathise with who this lead character meant to what. He just seemed like a bully. He just went around not saying anything and beating people up. But then, like, what I didn't actually realise is, because I didn't get further enough in the novel, is how much these books and this series are these wonderfully layered and procedural murder mysteries, an actual detective series. And Reacher is actually an extremely clever and bright deductive detective. He just happens to be 6 foot 6 feet tall and have hands the size of turkeys. And it's it's just this wonderful, like, there are moments in it where there's these wonderful juxtapositions where he's walking around a crime scene and like looking at grass and going, yeah, your killer went that way, he was followed by 3 people, and he had a sausage roll for lunch. And they're just like, how the hell did you work that out? And then in the next scene, he's like ripping off bottle caps with his bloody elbows and like battering people against doors.
Yeah, literally with a bicep. You watch him do it. He puts the bottle there on his bicep, he flexes, and then just pulls it away, and the cap just pings off. But he doesn't do anything with bravado.
No.
And he just does it. And he's like, yeah, no, but he just shrugs it off. It's really fascinating to watch. And there have been some critics that said, well, yeah, I'll watch the first series, but I don't think he'll be able to carry it as a leading character in the next few series. And I think one of the things I really find refreshing is that he's just a catalyst for everyone else to do all the talking, to do all the drama, to kind of create the conflict. He's just this massive catalyst. And if I'm right, Sam, each Reacher book is him going to a different town and solving another mystery. And I'm all for that. I want more of that. Because in this context, he's kind of like a drifter. He was a former military police officer.
Yes.
So pretty tough as nails, seen some awful stuff, but knows his stuff inside out procedurally. He's been adorned with medals and plaudits, and his IQ's off the charts, all this kind of stuff. And he just heard about this famous blues singer, so he just gets on a bus. He's got nothing on him apart from his clothes and his wallet, and he gets a military pension. And he's very utilitarian, so he rips his jacket, he'll put some tape on it, and if he needs to get new clothes, he'll only get new clothes if he needs to replace his old ones. So he's very utilitarian, and he just rocks up to this town, gets off the bus. This giant just walks into this rural fictional town called Margrave, and straight away he's arrested because there's been a murder in the area of 3 people, and because he's new in town, he's seen as a suspect. He's eventually seen as innocent, viewed as innocent, and he basically helps the local police force solve these murders, which opens this massive can of worms.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really, really love about it is between these 3 characters, you've got Jack Reacher himself, played by Alan Ritchson, who is essentially a Greek god. The Greeks would have worshipped this person because the Greeks loved anyone athletic. Add on top of that an IQ like that, they would have absolutely worshipped. Like, I was walking in Sweden, I walked into the National Museum, I was walking amongst marble sculptures, and none of them have got anything on this man. It's extraordinary. And he's paired up with Officer Conklin from Willa Fitzgerald, who's a local. She's born and raised here, so she knows the town, she knows the people. But her boss, Detective Finlay, is from Boston. He wears tweed, and he's just a fish out of water, a bit like Reacher, but he does everything by the book. And it's really interesting watching these 3 people try and solve this crime together, because they don't know who to trust, so they're having to work outside of the law at times to do this and not tell anyone. And it just grows and it grows. I find myself inside just eating popcorn. And I don't binge anything generally, but I have to resist the temptation of binge, because I just happily binge it. Because it just grows and grows and grows, and I'm never bored. And as Sam said, I get that wonderful Sherlock Holmes moments of him pointing out where the forensic officers have got stuff wrong. And it's so wonderful. You watch him take people down intellectually and then take other people down physically. Oh my God.
There's one episode where he goes full Home Alone in a house, and it is utterly spectacular. Like, it's like pretty much like it's a whole scene. It's just done in silence, and he's in this house, and that's all I want to say is he goes full home alone, and it is just wonderful. I think the one thing that is a bit of a dampener on the series is the fact that they said, Amazon have said that each series is going to be a book, and which is kind of unfortunate because like the characters are so interesting and how they interact with Reacher. It's kind of sad to look at them and go, the next series we're not going to have, none of these characters are going to exist again. Like it's going to be completely new cast, it's going to be completely new situation. Like all of this growth and all of this development that we've had between these people and Reacher is basically going to start again with a new town, which I don't know what that's going to be like really, because is it just going to be the same old, oh look at this gorilla, or oh he's a really big man, oh is it just going to be that all over again? That kind of like judging people on appearances, but really he's actually a smart, sensitive guy deep down.
But that's the Sherlock Holmes thing, isn't it? Which I love. And different case each week. People have heard of this person, and Holmes flexes, and Watson writes it all down, and then it's another case. I like that. Yeah. I'm fine with that here. And I think that going back to that point that some people say is a criticism, that because he's so monosyllabic, he's quite laconic, watching him change is going to be really interesting. Yeah. Over subsequent, even if it's glacial. I think that's going to be much more pronounced because we are going to get that rotating cast of characters around him. Genuinely, I love this. I'm loving it, I should say, because I've still got 2 episodes left to watch of this. I'm trying to eke Kris, it out for as long as possible.
Oh, the finale. Oh, it's just like, just imagine how bonkers it could get, and it just gets bonkers. And at the end of it, me and my wife were sitting there just like cheering because it just... Reacher, man, I love him. He's such a good character, and he's so well realised. You're just rooting for someone right from the get-go. It's wonderful. What's quite interesting about, I listened to an interview with Alan, and like they said that when they held the first round of interviews of Reacher, of auditions, they didn't find anyone because the audition was literally Reacher says nothing. And he said he just had to like sit in a room and not say anything and just react to what people were saying, and like they just got no one from that audition round until they actually had a script with words in it, which is quite interesting.
I have actually read that first. I've read most of the first book. I might have to read it again because
it's not great.
His style of writing I found really infuriating because he seemed to write just in statements, like. Mm-hmm. I don't remember seeing many commas. It was like genuinely like
what an absolute savaging, Dad! What a savaging! I don't remember seeing many commas.
Because I also it was a while ago since I read it, so I may have kind of misjudged that. But it was one of the things that when you think when you've spotted something, all you can see is that.
Yeah.
Or not see. When we were talking about gateway games, well, Kris and I played something the other day, which is definitely not a gateway game, but it might be one of the biggerest and bonkeriest games that I've played in a long time. Simply put, it's a game called Free Radicals, right? And it comes in quite an unassuming box. It's got the cyberpunk style artwork. It's designed by Nathan Wall and published by WizKids. And it's, on the surface, it's a very straightforward Euro style game where each player is attempting to activate buildings, destinations on the board. If they take ownership of those buildings, then other people, if they activate those buildings, then other players can go and visit them. Maybe they get some bonuses from visiting it, but the person who owns it, who activated it, they'll also get bonuses. And there's a knowledge track, and there's different economies floating around, and all this kind of stuff. But all good fun, all good fun. However, the twist on the game and what makes it so big and bloody bonkers is that it's asymmetrical, and there are 10 different ways out of the box that players can play with the game. So, yes, that noise, correct. You should be worried. And as Kris will know, asymmetric games are not my favourite. Like, I'm not a big fan of Root, for example. I can understand
You made
why
that
it's
very
great.
clear.
I can appreciate it, but I'm not a big fan of asymmetric games. It doesn't need a lot of going into, but it's basically, I'm not a big fan of someone doing something at the other side of the table, interacting with some of my characters, and I have no idea or control about what's going on. Like,
Right.
I just don't find that fun. What is interesting about Free Radicals is that even though it's got 10 completely different ways of playing and interacting with the game, everyone's trying to do the same thing. Everyone's going for the same goal. So essentially, there are 10 different ways of performing the same actions to interact with the main board. Does that make sense? So I think how Free Radicals kind of pitches itself, which is how I basically sold it to Kris. I gave him the box and I gave him these like little handy worksheets that it comes with. And it was just like, what type of game do you fancy this evening, Kris? What game do you want to play? Do you want to play a tile laying puzzle game? Do you want to play a little programmable game? Do you want to play a deck builder? Do you want to play a resource management game? Do you want to play a hand management game, Kris? What do you want to play?
And I said, I would like to play a dungeon crawler, please, Sam.
So I handed all of Chris's little bits, and he gets his own little rule sheet, which tells him what he has to do to basically play the actions that interact with the board. And I went with, what did I go with, Kris? I went with the
entertainers.
I went with the entertainers, which are essentially like a luck mitigation style game, where basically I had to draw hands of entertainers from my deck, and then basically put them on stage and use them for actions. But the entertainers I was putting on stage meant that they weren't going back into my deck. So I had to basically effectively manage my deck and my resources in order to make sure I wasn't putting really high profile entertainers on stage where they wouldn't be in my deck to be used for future rounds. But we were all doing the same sort of stuff, interacting with the board, activating buildings, doing that. We were just playing different games to get us to this one destination. And it's a really weird feeling. Like, it's weird anyway where someone's doing something across from you on the table and you have no idea what they're doing. It's even weirder and more bonkers when they're doing stuff on the table that you don't know what they're doing, but they're doing the same thing that you're doing, if that makes sense. Like, they're collecting resources and paying to activate buildings and visiting buildings and moving stuff along a knowledge track and getting victory points for doing it. They're doing exactly what you're doing it, but they're doing it in a completely different way to what you're doing. You know, and yeah, Kris, I don't know what kind of impression it's left on you, but I'm just really tempted to, get it down from the shelf again and be like, right, what do I want to play today?
I really do want to play it again. I'm wondering, a bit like, I think it was a point you made in Root, when we talked about Root on the pod. Well, will I want to play it once I played it, how to go every single faction? Yes. I do find it very, very interesting. I think one of the reasons why you like this is there's actually quite minimal player interaction. There's no real way I can mess up what you're doing with the entertainers. I can't send one of my adventurers on stage and mess up your show, and vice versa. You can't come and mess up my exploration with my adventurers. There's a little bit of area control in the center board, but other than that, it's just handing the prestige token back and forth to each other, and that's it. Without that, I think you and I are kind of in our own little worlds, which is something I don't begrudge. It's something I quite like, and that's why it feels a little bit Euro style. Can we talk about the art? Because certain factions are paired and they have a colour denoting them, and it's very bold colours, right? Very, very bold colours. I watched a review of this game on YouTube, and one of the commenters put at the bottom as a comment said, "It looks like a birthday cake's been sick on the table."
It's not one for the box, really, is it?
But like but I was thinking about this because it can be quite off-putting, but actually I would much prefer something like that than your typical, this is lovely to see a game that's set in the future. It's not dystopic in the slightest. That's something that needs to be mentioned. And it's colourful, it's bold, It's in your face. There is a world around this, which you can tap into if you want to or not.
Yeah,
and I was buzzing. I was buzzing throughout this.
Yeah.
I must admit, I was buzzing because the games themselves aren't difficult, but that's not the point. And again, I've seen some reviewers say, well, if you just had this factions on its own as a game, would it be good? Well, no, of course it won't. In the same way that if you just built a game out of a single faction of Root, it wouldn't be interesting whatsoever. The whole point is that wonderful combination of lock, that dance between them. And if you like the idea of asymmetry, but you don't really like that sense of, oh, I didn't know you could do that to me. Oh, then this is a great game. And and I think it does put its money where its mouth is in terms of its USP. It just about, I think, lands beyond being something of a gimmick. There is something of a degree of substance. And I know, for example, Rado loves this game, for example, another board game reviewer.
Right.
And it's one of those bonkers, wacky concepts, a bit like that game. Oh, was it called 503? I think it was the game where you essentially bought 503 different games in a box, and just had a box full of pieces, and it had a single rule book, and you could literally open it and go, okay, what are we playing today? It's that madness, that bonkers that is unlike anything you own, and just the novelty of being sat with a load of people, each playing a different game and going, oh gosh, and looking around going, oh yeah, I was looking at Sam thinking, oh, maybe I should have picked the entertainers because that looks really good fun, because Sam has to kind of make a prediction about what he thinks I'm going to do. Oh, I really, really like that. And I imagine you were looking at me, Sam, who's got these tiles face down and exploring this kind of futuristic dungeon, as it were. Trying to work out, what's Kris doing over there? Because he's not told me how he's playing this game. He could just be making it up.
Yeah. But knowing that in the box there's like worker placement, engine building, and I'm always in the mood for different kind of things. And I think that, what longevity this game has, I don't know, because, whether that novelty factor will wear off, or whether, I think there's definitely a bit of luck when it comes to combining the right styles of play against each other. Like, I don't think that we play to the best factions for a 2-player game. There's probably forums out there which will help. So I think there may be situations where you just have a bad time because you accidentally picked the wrong factions that game, which is a bit of a shame when it's kind of when it feels like a game that should be, I fancy a little bit of this, let's have a play. But I think for what effectively is like a sweet shop in a box, it's a little bit of fun. And I think that, maybe there's a few people who expect this isn't, it expects the fully fledged worker placement experience, or the fully fledged, hand management domino experience, or tile laying thing, when they pick it up that box. It's not. It's, as I've already said, when me and Kris were playing it, I just kept turning around to him and go, this is just bonkers, isn't it? This is utterly silly, and it's fun. And the less serious we took it, the more fun we were having, which I think sometimes you just got to let loose a bit and just chill out, everyone. Relax, guys. It's just a game.
That was another episode of Staying In with Sam Turner, Dan Frost, Peter Willington, and myself, Kris Darby. Tack! That's Swedish for thank you. And thank you for listening to us on our 150th episode. I would also like to say a very big tack to Coiled Springs and WizKids for very kindly sending us copies of games to review. We really do appreciate it, and we've really enjoyed playing them. So thank you very much for that. If you want to talk about the trials and tribulations of living with a sauna, I think Pete would really appreciate that. Feel free to get in touch with us at stayinginpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. @stayinginpod is our handle for all of those platforms. The video games we talk about will be on our Steam curation page, as well as our Board Game Geek page being the site for all of our board game discussions. That's kind of it really for me at the moment. We've made it to 150. That's a century and a half of episodes. So thank you very much for joining us on this journey. And as they say in Sweden, adjö. Bye.